PFF ranked the Jets wide receiver room as the 19th best in the league. The Jets have Garrett Wilson. The Jets have Mike Williams. After that, what do the Jets have? I brought two of the best in the business to join me on this evening. We have Brandyn Pokrass of Jet X Factor and Micheal Nania also of Jet X Factor. Let's roll.
Jets, Jets, let's go.
Jets wide receiver Wesley Walker. Wesley, how you doing today? ESPN writer Mr. Rich Cimini, Jets reporter for The Athletic, Mr. Zach Rosenblatt, Hall of Famer and Jets legend Mr. Marty Lyons.
Your host, Connor Law.
Welcome in, everyone. Here we go on a Wednesday evening. Like I said, PFF ranked the Jets wide receiver room as the 19th best in the league. Is that true? Like I said, I have two of the best in the business joining me today. Brandyn Pokrass and Micheal Nania join me on the program. We'll go over to Brandyn first. Brandyn, how you doing today?
Doing good. Knicks just re-signed OG Anunoby. Feeling real good about that. You know, looking really good for contention, but excited to talk some Jets football. Thank you for having me on today.
Of course, great to have you. And Micheal, how you doing? I know you're also a Knicks fan, so initial reaction to the OG news.
Yeah, I'm feeling great. And it's a lot for sure, but I mean, the Knicks really had no choice here. So I'm thrilled to be able to run it back with this core. Hopefully we can get Hartenstein back too, but I'm prepared to lose him if that has to happen. But yeah, as a Knicks and Jets fan, and I could throw the Yankees into there too. Like between all of my teams right now, like I don't think I've ever seen this much collective talent in my lifetime as someone who's seen this entire 21st century. So it's an exciting time. I feel confident that someone's going to find a way to get a championship at some point in the near future.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm the odd one out in almost every conversation I have in terms of basketball. I am probably one out of a total of probably 2,000 net fans out there. So I'm unfortunately a Brooklyn Nets fan. We did lose Micheal Bridges, but I don't hate the deal. But let's go right into talking some Jets football. We're going to be talking a lot about the wide receiver room. PFF had the Jets wide receiver room ranked 19th on their list. Brandyn, what's your initial reaction to this?
I mean, I'm not surprised because, you know, obviously we have the upper echelon with Garrett Wilson. I think everyone thinks with Aaron Rodgers in the fold, Garrett Wilson's in store for a really big year.
Yep. I
think since the offseason, a lot of people have been talking about the uncertainty revolving around everything behind him. And you saw that last season, and I think you're seeing that again this season. Like, I think Mike Williams is a really talented player, and I think it's exactly what you need as the number 2 in this offense. But he has to be on the field. You know, he's not going to be fully healed until really the start of the regular season. We're not even certain what the training camp for Mike Williams is going to look like. And then beyond that, Malachi Corley. You know, very talented rookie receiver. What is he contributing in year one? Beyond that, what does your depth look like with Xavier Gibson and Jason Brownlee? And does Alan Lazard give you anything? There's uncertainty at the position beyond Wilson. So I think people might jump at the first sight of it like, oh, how could a duo of Garrett Wilson and Mike Williams be ranked so low? But there really is questions for this unit, and it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out.
Yeah, so I've said that all along. I think after Mike Williams and Garrett Wilson, it's question marks. Like you said, Malachi Corley, what have we seen out of him? Jason Brownlee, I mean, we haven't seen a ton out of him. Xavier Gibson, another one we haven't seen a ton out of. Micheal, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a fair ranking because, like, if you're looking at it objectively, there are a lot of superstar receivers in the league. So having Garrett Wilson, and I was thinking about this recently, it's so hard to rank receivers right now because, like, what is the gap between, you know, maybe Tyreek Hill and Justin Jefferson are in their own tier right now. Maybe CeeDee Lamb's up there. But after that, it's like there are so many guys in that tier with Garrett Wilson. It feels like at least half of the league has at least one guy who's like that. So when it comes to ranking the receiver groups in the league, it's all about how reliable is the rest of your depth chart. And the ceiling for this Jets unit, they could be a lot higher than 19. They could be top 10.
Yes.
They could be top 5. Like, it's there the potential is there for them to do that. If like all the questions you mentioned, Brandon, like if those are answered, Mike Williams is healthy, Corley breaks out, they can be one of the best in the league. But when you're looking at it right now and you're talking about the reliability, how much can we count on the, collective talent of the unit beyond the top guy? There are just a lot of other units in the league that I think you feel a lot more comfortable about the depth than you do with the Jets, because, Mike Williams being 30 coming off an ACL it's tough. That's a huge question mark. And then, Corley, we love him, but, third round pick, we'll see what he has to do. And then Gibson was undrafted last year. When you look at it from an objective lens, I think it makes sense. They have a, superstar who lifts this unit up at the top, who's top 5 to 10 guy in the league, you're hoping. But after that, it's a high ceiling, but the floor is also low if some of those questions aren't answered. So I think putting them in the middle is fair until we see how some of these questions get answered.
Yeah, speaking of question marks, Alan Lazard, how will he perform with Aaron Rodgers at the helm compared to Zach Wilson, Tim Boyle, and Trevor Siemian last season? It's a huge question with Rodgers. Where do you think we'd see Lazard fall on the depth chart? How do you think he'll get involved? I'm going to throw this to Brandon first. Do you think we could see him behind Gibson, ahead of Gibson? I feel like Gibson might be that 4-tier level. Where do you see Lazard? Do you see him below 4 or ahead of 4?
I think I said this earlier on during OTAs, but I think Lazard's best role, and there's going to be a distinction. I think his best role is that situational type player for the Jets, where, he comes in on the third and short or the red zone where he can use his frame a bit more. If he's catching the ball, it's in a good situation where Rodgers is trusting him in a spot where he knows he can get him the ball in a good area. The problem with that, though, is with the drop issues, do you want that type of player costing you third downs, fourth downs, etc.? I worry with this receiver room that for whatever reason, they might move Lazard above Gibson or one of these guys that he shouldn't be above. Like, I think it's more so Brownlee, because I think Gibson's going to carve out a role as that number 3 early on while Corley's still learning the offense, because this is a Jets team that they've done it with every rookie. They bring these guys along slow unless it's an absolute necessity. Even Garrett Wilson wasn't on the field right away under this regime. It took them 2 weeks, but he wasn't that number 1 bona fide star wide receiver right off the bat for this team. So I think that first 3, obviously depending on Mike Williams' health, is going to be solidified. But for some reason, I feel like Lazard is going to have chances early in the year. And it's going to start in that situational role where he might be that 4th receiver, but they're bringing him on the field in these spots where Aaron Rodgers is going to try to go to him. And if he converts and he's successful in those, maybe he sees a higher snap uptick week after week. If he fails right off the bat, I don't think you're seeing much more of Lazard, because, as close as Aaron Rodgers is with him, Aaron Rodgers doesn't put up with his receivers making mistakes.
Yes.
Even if they're close, even if he trusts him, the minute those mistakes happen repetitively, he's just going to look someone else's direction. So I think Lazard is going to have a role right off the bat, but I do think he's the most make or break in the sense of it could go positive if he starts one way, but he could just be completely out of the lineup if it goes the other.
Brandon, Michael, what do you got?
Yeah, it's an interesting discussion. Like, I was talking about this with Robbie Sabo and Joe Blewett a couple of days ago, but they were saying, and I kind of agree, that there's a possibility you get to week 1 and maybe he's even inactive, because when you break it down, it's like, if Mike Williams is healthy, you've Garrett Wilson, Mike Williams, Xavier Gibson, who might be a returner or at least is going to have a role in this room. Corley is definitely going to be active, even if he's not at the top of the depth chart. Irvin Charles is going to be active. He's your special teams ace. So that's 5 receivers right there. And you could go with 6 on game day, but it is on the fence there. When you start comparing it to some of these other positions, we know they like their D-line depth. The O-line depth is going to be important with some of the injuries. So you do start having that debate of, is he even going to be active on game days? But at the same time, when you have an inexperienced 3rd-round rookie who's in the mix here with Corley, and Xavier Gibson, who still has a lot to prove, and then you consider the connection with Aaron Rodgers and the fact that, he was a good situational player when he was playing a role like Brandon's saying, and he's only getting like 3 targets a game, and most of them were specified in those things that he's good at, like let him use his body over the middle on a slant, out of the slot. I think he's good in that big slot role, especially in the red zone. Let him go get a jump ball on a go route. Now, he could not do any of those things last year. It didn't matter what role he was playing because his hands were just made of stone. But as long as he can get over that, then he could be a decent player in, some of those roles. So I think, to go even further than what you were saying, Brandon, I think going into training camp and preseason, I think that is where we're going to see, Lazard's performance potentially have an impact on whether he gets opportunities. Because if Gibson continues to live up to some of the hype that he's built so far, if Corley comes along quickly and the Jets are confident in those guys, I think you can see a scenario where Lazard isn't even active on game days, or maybe is active and barely plays. But if those guys do come along slowly and Lazard is at least competent enough and shows that he can recapture some of what he had with Rodgers, then I think there is a scenario where he could even be as high as the 3rd option at receiver, maybe playing some of those big slot reps, specifically coming on the field, 3rd downs, red zones, things like that. So I think there's a wide spectrum of possibilities for Lazard going into the season. And he really does need to have, I think, a good camp in preseason to put himself in a good spot.
Yeah, you mentioned Rodgers not putting up with wide receivers dropping and just mental errors. We saw that firsthand on Hard Knocks and One Jets Drive during training camp last season. You mentioned the hype around Xavier Gibson having an increased role. I'm a big fan of Xavier Gibson. I think when Garrett Wilson lines up on the outside, I think he's going to be the main slot guy for the Jets. And I think we expect big things out of Gibson. Staying with the topic of an increased role for Xavier Gibson was our kickoff returner last season. He obviously had that incredible return touchdown against the Bills in week 1, but after that, he was pretty average to below average, and the Jets have, a solid amount of guys competing for that return spot. The Jets brought in Jakeem Grant for a tryout. You have Malachi Corley, Izzy, Gibson. There's a lot of guys Tariq Cohen. There's a lot of names competing for this job. Brandon, at the end of the day, who do you think is returning kicks for the New York Jets week 1?
I think that's one of the most interesting questions revolving around this team, and I think every team in the NFL, because the short answer is I don't think anyone knows yet. Yep. Because it's not the normal kickoff it's been. It's not just, we need just the most shifty, athletic guy back there to return our kicks. Now, okay, are we going to lean more towards the shiftiness and athleticness, or do we want someone with better vision and someone that can hit a hole and immediately get downhill? It's going to be really interesting to see how teams experiment with different plays, different styles back there. And I think the Jets, being a team that really prioritizes their special teams, I think more than a decent amount of teams in the league, they're going to experiment with everything. So I think there is an avenue that after all the preseason games and training camp practices, they do determine that Xavier Gibson is that guy. There's an avenue that they determine Tariq Cohen's that guy because Xavier Gibson has a way bigger role on offense than most people expect. I think there is a shot Izzy takes it, or one of the other running backs competing, or they bring in a guy like Jakeem Grant. It all depends on who fits what the Jets want to do. And quite frankly, nobody knows that yet. So I'm really interested to see it. If I were to throw a dart at the wall, I'd say it's either Gibson or Cohen right now, just because I think not only would they provide the kickoff value, but in the case of Cohen, if you even get I'd say 30 or 40% of what he does with the ball in his hands, and you can just throw him out there on offense a little bit, that's yet another dynamic you can add to your offense along with special teams. But I'm really interested to watch it. I'm not 100% sure in any direction yet.
Yeah, so Michael, one thing before we get to you, Brandon, you mentioned it being, not knowing what teams are going to do in terms of plays with this new kickoff rule. When I had Jets punter Thomas Morstead on my show, I'd say about 2 to 3 weeks ago, he said that, the organization's really happy that they got drawn for that Monday night game, so they can kind of see that the last game of the week, they get to see what other teams kind of do with this new kickoff rule and what plays they try to run. But yeah, Michael, I'll let you go before I give my prediction for the Jets kickoff guy.
No, yeah, it's going to be really interesting across the whole league. I personally really see a scenario where we're going to, like, week one's going to be over, and I think that's going to be one of the biggest stories is, people are going to watch these games, and we're going to see maybe 2 or 3 games that are tilted by a kickoff return touchdown. Like, I think it's going to be crazy explosive this year because there's going to be a ton of returns to a degree we either at least haven't seen in a long time, but have maybe never seen, because the idea of a 30-yard line touchback is insane to me. So I think we're going to see a lot of returns, and I think those returns are going to be more productive because, like, we're not seeing the kickoff team get that running start anymore. So it's going to operate more like a play from scrimmage. So like Brandon said, I don't think it's necessarily a case anymore of, prioritizing speed, just who can get to the second, third level and have the long speed as much, because it's kind of like just setting up your block. So to me, that points me to one guy who I think is a dark horse. And I don't know if he's actually being considered for it or not based on what's going on in OTAs, but I think Isaiah Davis is an intriguing fit to me. I know he doesn't really have the long speed, but that's what I'm saying here is because I don't think that matters as much anymore, because I think it's going to be more so a case of you're going to get up there and it's going to be like a scrimmage play, and it's can you find the holes and bounce through there. And Joe Blewett showed it in his film review, but his vision and his cutting ability, short area bounce is really good. And like I said, doesn't have the long speed. I think he's like something in the 4.5, so not great, but a guy who can consistently get you 30, 40-yard returns, I kind of think he can do that. So he's like my dark horse, but I feel like it's probably going to be Gibson or Cohen, because Cohen could, you keep him and he could give you a little bit on offense. You could do punt returns as well, but Gibson also has a chance to retain it because of what he showed last year and the fact that they were confident in him. But he does have to have better hands because he put a lot of footballs on the ground. So that's the big key for him. But I think it'll be one of those two guys. But I'm very interested to see how this whole format plays out.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's very interesting, and just whoever's named the week 1 return man, I think that might be subject to change. I think the Jets, depending on what happens throughout the season, I think the Jets might be willing, Robert Saleh and then Brett Boyer, they might be willing to kind of change it up depending on performance in terms of kickoffs. I'm with you guys on Xavier Gibson, but another name, I think it's Malachi Corley. I think he has a real chance to compete, and I think that's a main way for him to really get involved. I don't think he's going to get a ton of action on the offense like right away. I think he's going to kind of need to earn that. So I think the way the Jets kind of ease him in is make him the return man. In terms of Cohen, I really like Cohen. I think he's a solid player. The difference is there's a difference between pre-ACL tear 2021 Cohen and Cohen after missing 2 seasons in the league. It'll be really interesting to see how if Cohen even makes the roster after tearing his ACL and being out for 2 years. I personally like him more than Izzy. I don't think Izzy's on the roster. I was big on Izzy last season, but when the Jets the way I look at the Jets running back room right now, I think it's Breece Allock is one. You have Braylon. I think Braylon Allen's two. Allen and Davis are locks, and then that 4th spot is up in camp. I think it's between Izzy and Cohen, and I think it's really going to come down to whoever performs better on special teams play in preseason and camp. I think special teams is going to be the deciding factor because whoever wins that job don't expect a ton of reps on the offense. So I think it's really going to be special teams that wins them that spot. But guys, we have 2 callers on the line, so we're going to go over to them first. First up, we have Bobby Midnight joining the show. Bobby, how you doing?
Oh, my friends, how you doing? Brandyn.
Good.
And
how you doing?
Connor. And the other guy I met one time, Michael, right?
Yep.
I met you once. Hey, guys, how old are you guys? I want to just see how old you guys are. Because
I'm 12.
I know that. I'm asking this question because I want to ask him another question. How old are you, Brandyn?
22.
And how old are you, Michael?
23.
Okay, way back when you were 12, were you as smart as this kid?
No. I don't know. It was a very long time ago.
Well, I remember way back when I wasn't as smart as this kid. This kid's doing good. Connor, you're doing an excellent job. I like all your comments that you said.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Bobby.
And then I like yours, Brandyn and Micheal. You guys are awesome guys. So I wanted to jump on your show. I was having a show. I'm sorry. I didn't even know you were going on today. I love your background. Where are you?
Oh, I'm visiting family upstate New York. But Bobby, you got any Jet questions to ask Micheal and Brandyn?
Yeah, well, my comment is that I think Brandyn, like he said, Brandyn Allen's going to be the second running back. I think I like that kid. He is awesome. And then the other guy, who's the other third
Isaiah Davis.
Yeah, he looks good, but I like Allen better. They're both good, but Allen's better. Okay, I'll jump off now. So you guys have a great night, and let's go Yankees.
Thank you, Bobby.
Right. Thank you. You too.
Brandyn and I have intrusive thoughts about the Yankees that we might want to keep to ourselves. But Micheal, yeah, go Yankees for Micheal. But let's go over to our next caller. 3 siblings. Jay joining the show. Jay, how you doing? You're muted.
Oh
wait.
Can you hear me?
Yep. Got you.
Good. All right. So I had a question really quick. I know the topic today was about wide receivers.
Yep.
And in my head, right, me thinking as a logical Jets fan, I try to be. I try to think that we have a wide receiver core that is not up to par. But realistically, when you have Al Nazar as your third, maybe fourth option, I mean, what other teams can say that, you know? So my question to you is, do you believe in your mind the Jets have a good receiving core? And was it more about the quarterback play than it was actually the receivers? Because I just feel like times we did have receivers open, and I just feel like defenses, they were like, hey, let's play man-type, man-to-man defense, make Zach make a decision or make that quarterback make a decision to beat us. They would bracket Garrett Wilson, and they would have everybody else beat them one-on-one, and we felt like Allen couldn't do that. So how you guys feel, how optimistic are you about our receiver core?
Micheal, I'll let you go first on this one.
Yeah, I'm feeling pretty optimistic, and it really comes down to the health of Mike Williams, because I think if he's healthy, that can be one of the best duos in the game, because the health has really been the only concern for him. I mean, the numbers that Mike Williams has put up when he's been out there are, would be the best on most teams, and for a number 2 receiver would be up there among the best in the league. And I think what's intriguing about him is he's shown you that he can play this role, because he was playing next to Keenan Allen all those years.
Yep.
And he's putting up that production, doing what they're going to be asking him to do here, like playing alongside a number 1 guy who is going to be a target magnet, which Keenan Allen was and Garrett Wilson is, both great route runners who are going to take on a lot of the hard work. And he's just going to have to take advantage of the coverage that they demand, catch those jump balls down the field, and be a big body target. And he's been elite at that. His contested catches, his deep balls, it's all up there, one of the best in the league. It's just, is he going to be out there? And then if he is, at this age off the ACL, are you getting the same version of him? So they took a gamble in relying on a guy like that who has these type of concerns. But I think what he has shown is exactly what you needed in that role. And then beyond that, I think, Lazard did have he was bad regardless of the quarterbacking last year. He dropped passes that were well thrown by Zach Wilson or whoever was throwing in the ball, and there were low effort plays. So I think he was bad by his own standards, but I also think that he was in Green Bay a solid player for the role that the Jets want him to play, which is, like, you look at his first 3 seasons there, and he was very efficient with the targets he got when he was only getting 40 to 50 a year. It's, when he played in 2022, when he was their top guy and had 100 targets, we saw some signs of what was going to come this year with the Jets. And then again, last year he was the second receiver, and we saw a lot of those same concerns because the role was too big and he was doing more than you want him to. But even if he does have to play third, fourth receiver, I think he can do a decent enough job in that as well. And I think Gibson and Corley give you a lot of upside in terms of athleticism, what they could do with the ball in their hands. So I like the upside. It's a lot of questions and unknowns that we need to see how they play out. I mean, what do you guys think?
Yeah, Brandyn, what do you got in terms of that question from Jay?
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm optimistic, but I also think it's a combination of the quarterback play and the receivers, right? Because the Lazard issues are well documented, right? The lack of effort, the drops, the just seeming just his production just fell off a cliff. But take it a step further, right? Xavier Gibson's playing against top tier competition for the first time. Remember, he didn't go to a big college. He came
Stephen F.
from
Austin.
Exactly. Yeah, Stephen F. Austin. Stephen F. Austin, right? It's his first time playing in the NFL, rookie season. He's adjusting. He's learning. Now he has that full off season. Same thing with Jason Brownlee. He's adjusting. He has that full off season. So I think while it's a combination of, Zach Wilson, obviously we know how he was as a quarterback, Trevor Siemian, Tim Boyle, the receivers also didn't help them as much in that capacity where there were a decent amount of drops. The separation wasn't always there for those guys. But then you look at the quarterback play. Aaron Rodgers, he's going to get the ball out. He's going to be accurate. He's going to understand the progressions and actually go through them and make sure that the offense is functioning at its highest level. So while everything isn't on the receivers, it's also going to be much more evident that the group's going to be fine. It's the combination of the fact that I am confident about the receiver group's talent, whether it is Garrett Wilson or Mike Williams or a combination of Gibson and Corley and even Brownlee and Lazard. But it's also the fact that I think Aaron Rodgers, just by virtue of him playing, not even saying he's going to be at an elite level, but I think even 60%, 70% of Aaron Rodgers is going to raise that receiver room's production just because of his mind and how he knows how to go through his progressions and just simply his ability to play quarterback.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you, Brandon. I've said it time in and time out. Aaron Rodgers makes everyone around him so much better. I mean, like, my comparison is always Robert Tonyan as the tight end for the Packers. I mean, look what his product. I had him on my fantasy team that year, so I was really lucky. But look what Aaron Rodgers did to him. Turned him into a top 5 quarterback for that year. And then he goes back to Jordan Love, and he can't find to seem anything. So he can't seem to find anything. So I 100% agree. I think Rodgers makes everyone around him better. And going back to the list, I think 19, I agree, is expected. But the Jets, I definitely think this wide receiver room has potential. And it has to be a mix, a balance of quarterback and wide receiver play for, the faults. But Jay, you got any more questions?
One quick question. I'm going to hop off after I ask this question. What is your biggest area of concern, like position group, for the team, for the Jets? Like, what do you think is a red flag if you had to think of any position that you're worried about going this season? I appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you, Jay. Brandon, take it away.
I think receivers up there, just in the sense of the depth, where, if the guys don't step up, if Mike Williams is still hurt, and even if he is on the field, doesn't look like himself, that's definitely on the list for me. I think it's also defensive line to an extent where if Javon Kinlaw isn't what he's supposed to be and what the Jets paid him, if Will McDonald doesn't take that step forward, the Jets play with such a big rotation that there's a part of me where I'm like, I think things are going to go right, but I also don't want to have flashbacks of the first year of Saleh where Quinn Williams in that first unit would be on the field, everything would be great, and then all of a sudden that second unit comes on in the rotation and they can't stop anyone in the run. They can't get a pass rush, and all of a sudden teams are driving down the field. Obviously, the secondary being as good as it is now will help, and the linebackers being as good as they are now will help, but there's just a voice in the back of my head being like, if the defensive line doesn't pan out, it could be a really, really bad situation for this team.
Yeah, that's the defensive line, wide receiver, definitely up there. I have an interesting one here. I'm gonna go running back. Other than Breece Hall, what have we seen out of these guys? Braylon Allen, we haven't seen him perform at an NFL level. I mean, Isaiah Davis, coming from a very weak college, we haven't seen him produce at the NFL. And Tariq Cohen, coming off a torn ACL, hasn't played in the NFL in over 2 years. Izzy, we haven't seen him. Really, Breece Hall, I think he's obviously a top running back in the league. I think other than him, it's a bunch of question marks. So I definitely think that's something to be concerned about. But yeah, in terms of the defensive line, I think defensive line is definitely up there. What Kinlaw, and what happens if someone takes a step back? I know we don't want to think that way, but what happens if a guy like Jermaine Johnson doesn't have a season that he had on top of a guy like Kinlaw not performing? So there are a lot of combined factors. I don't think the Jets' run defense is going to be as good this year. I really don't think so. But Michael, what do you got?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say the same thing. I was going to go with specifically the interior defensive line behind Quinn Williams. Definitely a concern. And I agree with you. And I'm glad you brought that up in terms of the run defense. I think it is going to be an average at best, maybe below average run defense. Mm-hmm. But I did an article on, it was the last article I did, I think yesterday. But yeah, I think that's a good thing in a way, in a sense that, like, being a perfect football team is hard. You rarely see that. Even the teams that win the Super Bowl are rarely perfect. If there's something you're going to struggle with and, you have to choose as the weak spot in your team, I think that's what you want it to be. I would rather struggle against the run than struggle to pass the ball, stop the pass, or run the ball myself on offense. And you look at the records of the teams that struggle to stop the run, it didn't even really matter. The Ravens, the Chiefs, the Browns, the Bills, a lot of teams that were great overall and great defensively last year were below average or near the bottom in terms of the yards per carry that they allowed. So I do think it will be an issue, but I think it's something that you can work around when you have a great pass defense. So as long as they could stay where they were in terms of rushing the passer, coverage, which I expect that they will, and there are some question marks. Can Will McDonald step up? Jermaine Johnson maintain what he did? There are some questions in pass game too, but as long as I think they are going to answer those questions and still be an elite pass defense to the point where if the run defense is shaky, it's not going to matter too much. So for me to pick a different one outside of that, and I like your running back pick because that's outside the box.
Appreciate it.
No one really brings. It's always D-line or safety, and I'm going to pick safety here to go along with that. But I like the running back one because Breece Hall has been so important to the success of this team. We've seen the on off with him, like 2022 when he went out. And then last year, the fall off when he wasn't on the field. He's been a play maker for this team. He's made things happen on his own. And obviously we hope the offensive line is good enough to where he doesn't have to do that as much and we could just have well-blocked plays. Here's 7 yards for you and you don't have to do anything. Yeah. But so much of what their production has been the last 2 seasons has been Breece Hall just made that happen on his own. And, you're not always going to have another Breece Hall, a second Breece Hall in your team. But at the same time, like, you want to have good enough depth to where when you're losing a guy who makes that type of impact, you have someone who could come close, occasionally do that. And we just don't know if these rookies can do it yet because we haven't seen them and they're rookies. So that is a good pick on your part. But I'm going to go safety to throw another one in there, just because. And I really like Chuck Clark. He's one of my guys on this team. I think he's going to really surprise a lot of people. I like Tony Adams, but just in the vein of a lot of positions on this roster have proven superstars, and it's really only a few that don't. And looking at safety, Chuck Clark, veteran player, coming off major injury. Tony Adams, shaky last season, showed upside, but not perfect. So, yeah, it's just not as strong as other positions. But I think it says a lot that this is one of the main concerns. I don't really think it's that bad. It's just that so many positions are so well solidified that something like safety, which is pretty average, I would say, is one of your biggest concerns.
Yeah, I completely agree. Brandyn, Michael, thank you guys for joining the show. Brandyn, you got any final thoughts?
Nope. Just thank you so much for having me on. Can't wait to do it again soon.
Yeah, of course. Michael, any final thoughts?
Yeah, same. Always a pleasure to come on. Looking forward to being back.
Of course. Thank you guys for joining me. Everyone, thank you guys for watching. And as always, JTS, Jets, Jets, Jets.